Hi everyone. In this video, we're gonna go ahead and start bug fixing our application and the finishing touches. So go ahead and open your Uber clone project, and then we need to go ahead and uninstall the application Uber clone inside our emulator. I'm gonna select it and then I'm gonna drag it here in order to uninstall it. And then I'm gonna run my application again. So here I'm gonna log in as a driver. So Max123, log in, and then I'm gonna click on log in. So next, if I go ahead and click on this button, it's gonna ask me for a permission in order to access the device's location. But what happens if I click on allow? So if I click on allow, our application is going to crash. So did you see what happened? Our application is crashed and then it is run again. So it is your challenge. Go ahead and find out why our application is crashed. You can take a look at the logcat in order to see some information about this error. For example, here you might see that some information, for example, fatal exception main, and here you should see some information about this exception. It is a runtime exception, and it says that failure delivering result. So let's see what we have here. You can see that there are some helpful informations here, but you should look for some keywords that are familiar to you. And you should find out what is wrong with your application. So go ahead, give this challenge your best shot, and good luck. So first, in order to solve this problem, take a look at the logcat. It says listener null. This means that our location listener variable is null when we click on the allow button. So now that the application is crashed and run again, if I click on this button, everything will work perfectly without any problems. But if I go ahead and uninstall this application, and then I try to run it again, let's see what happens. You will see that when I ask for the permission and when I click on the allow, our application is going to crash. So let me log in as a driver and then log in. So here, if I click on this button and it's gonna ask for this permission. If I click on this allow, our application is going to crash. Why? Because the location listener is null. So let's see what is happening with our code. So let's go back to Android Studio. Let me close this logcat area. Let's go ahead and open the Java package or Java folder, and then go ahead and open the driver request list activity here. So now let's take a look at this method, onRequest permission result method. Why? Because this method is going to be executed when the user deals with the dialog or with the permission dialog that is going to ask the user to give us the permission. So for example, let me show you where this method is actually executed. Open. Let me uninstall it again, and I'm gonna run it again. So let me first log in as a driver. Now, if I click on this button, it's gonna ask for a permission. So whatever happens here, if I click on this deny or this allow, this onRequest permissions result will be executed. So this means that, for example, if I click on this allow, now this method is executed. So let's see what we have here. We have this request code and it is checking for the permission. It says that if the user has already given us the permission, or this means that if the user clicked on the allow button on that dialog, so if this condition is true, then it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this if statement and it's gonna check for this if statement, the second if statement. And then it's gonna say that if the context compat.check self permission has already given us the permission to access the location here, so we can see that it is asking for this permission. And then if that is the case, Then it's gonna go and ask for the location updates, and then it's gonna go and get the current driver location, and then it's gonna update the request list view based on that location. So let's take a look at this code. It says location manager dot request location updates. So let's see what we have here. It says that we pass the GPS provider the minimum time and the minimum distance. And let's see what we have here. We have location listener. So this location listener is null based on the information that we saw inside the logcat. And that is true. Why? Because if you scroll to the top inside our class, you can see that we declared this variable, location listener. And we went into the onCreate method and we initialized this method, but based on a condition. According to our condition, we initialized this variable, location listener. We said that if the user's device operating system is less than 23 or less than the version Marshmallow, or we have this one, it says that if the user has already given us the permission to access the location. So inside this onCreate method, if the user has not already given us the permission to access the location, or if the user's device is not less than 23, then this if statement will not be executed. In other words, this location listener will not be executed. So that's why when we run this application and this condition here is not true, then you will see that this if statement is not executed. And then when we click on this button in order to get the permission, and when we click on the allow, the location listener is still null because we only initialized this location listener inside this if statement. And that's why our application is crashed. So how we can solve this problem? Now we need to go and we need to create a method. We need to use the encapsulation here. So before the ending curly brace of our class, I'm going to say private, and I'm going to say void. Let's name it as initialize location listener. Put a pair of parentheses here, and then just open and close this method by using these curly braces. Now we simply need to go inside our onCreate method and get the location listener initialization code. So here, I'm just gonna get all of these codes with all of its methods. I'm just gonna cut these codes here. So notice that I have cut all of the codes that we had inside this if statement. And then I'm gonna scroll down here and I'm gonna paste it inside this initialize location listener. Okay, so now that we put this code here inside this method, now we can simply go inside the onCreate method here, inside this if statement, and we just need to call that method. We just need to say initialize location listener, right? So whenever we need this location listener to be initialized, we just call this method. So another place is inside the onRequest permission result here. So when the user, for example, responds to that dialog that is going to ask for the permission, here we can say, so before calling the request location updates, we need to initialize the location listener. So when the user, or when we pass the location listener to this request location updates method here, it will not be null. So here I'm just gonna say initialize location listener. Now let's go ahead and first let me just uninstall this application, and then I'm gonna click on run. So let's log in as a driver. So max 123, and then I'm gonna click on log in. So now let's click on this button Now it's gonna ask for the permission. Now, if I click on this allow, our application will not be crashed. So let's see what happens. Now you can see that our application didn't crash, and we also got the result here. That was the bug fixing that I was talking about. So now that this problem is solved, let's go and let's do some finishing touches on our application. So first of all, I want to get the location of the driver, and then I want to save that location to the server. So inside the driver request list activity, I'm gonna just scroll down here and I'm gonna create a method inside our class. So it's always better to create a method for one specific task. So I'm gonna say private void, and I'm gonna name my method name as save driver location to parse, and I'm gonna put a pair of parentheses. So let's just open and close this method, and let's go inside this method. First, we need to get the current parse user. So I'm gonna say parse user, and I'm gonna name it as driver, a summon operator, parse user dot get current user. So notice that this method get current user is going to return a value of type parse user, semicolon. Now I can just say driver dot. So I'm gonna say put, and I'm gonna add a new column to the user class. So if you go to the server and if you click on this user class, this is our user class, and it is all of our columns. So I'm gonna add a new column here as the driver location, so we can save the location of each user, or in other words, of each driver that we have here. So we only want to get the location of the driver and put it here as a new column. So notice that we have this column that says as, and we are differentiating between the driver and a passenger. So let's go back to our Android Studio, and I'm gonna say driver.put. So the name of the column is going to be driver location, okay, comma, and then here, so notice that when I add this column to the server, this column will also be added for all the other users. So for example, a passenger can have a column named as driver location. So here, I'm gonna say driver location as the name of the column, and the value will be a value of type parse geopoint. So I'm gonna say new parse geopoint. But it's better to create a variable for this location. I'm gonna say, so parse geopoint, and I'm gonna name it as driver location, assignment operator, new parse geopoint, and we need to pass some arguments to this parse geopoint. Here we need to pass the latitude and the longitude of this user. So for this method, I'm gonna create a parameter. I'm gonna say location, and I'm gonna name it as location. And here, I'm gonna get the latitude from this location that we get as a parameter from this save driver location to parse. So I'm gonna say location.get latitude, comma, location.get longitude, semicolon. Now I can just go ahead and pass the driver location here. So instead of saying new parse geopoint, I can say driver location. Done. Now we need to say driver dot save in background. So let's choose this one with a save callback. So I'm gonna say new save callback. So if there is no error, can show a toast message to the user, or we can simply log some data. So I'm gonna just create a toast message, toast.make text. So the context is going to be driver request list.this. The message is going to be location saved, comma, and the length is going to be short dot show. That's it. Now we need to go ahead and call this method from the places that we want. So here the best place to save the driver location to parse would be inside the update requests list view method. So let me find the method here. Here you can see that we are accessing the driver location, and here it says that if the driver location is not equal to null, so let's say that we want to save the driver location to parse, and we get the location from this driver location argument that we get from this update request list view. So let's go ahead and run our application, and let's see what happens. So let's click on this get nearby requests. Now it says location saved. And if I go ahead and open the server, so if I refresh this page, it should show us the new column, but it is not. We need to go ahead and refresh the entire page so we can see the new column here. So here it is, the driver location value for this Max driver. Now that we saved this location driver to the server, we can go ahead and somehow allow the passenger to know that the driver has accepted the request. So in order to do that, we need to go to the function. So first, let me tell you that if I click on John here, you can see this button. So now let's go inside the view locations map activity class. So I'm gonna close this class and I'm gonna double click on this view locations map activity. And then let's go into the onClick method of this button. So here, when this btn write that set on click listener method is actually called, then we are going to just save another object to the server. We are going to put a new column that is going to be called accepted request, or I can say request accepted, and its type is going to be Boolean, true or false. So here you can see that we are creating a query for this request car class, and then we are getting the username of the request that is tapped or selected. So we are passing the username here, and we are just finding in background this query. And here we have this if statement and this for loop. So inside this for loop, we have access to this Uber request, right? So I'm gonna say Uber request dot put, let's specify the name of the column to be accepted, or we can say request accepted. So it can be either true or false, okay? So if the user clicks on this button, btn write, this means that the driver wants to give the passenger a ride. So I'm gonna say the value true here. It is a Boolean value, true or false. So when we put this object in the server, its data type will be of type Boolean. And if you want to, you can also create a column here and you can see the data types. So for example, you can see the Boolean data type here. So let me click on cancel. Now you can see that now that we put this new column here, it's gonna go ahead and save it in the background. So here, let me just run the application and let's click on get nearby requests. Now let me just click on John here, and I'm gonna click on I want to give John a ride. So now it's gonna save this value to the server. So I'm gonna refresh this page because we have a new column, and it should now say request accepted in the request car class. So here you can see that request accepted is true. For those other requests that are not accepted, you can see that we have undefined, but this one for John is true because we added this new request here recently, we can't see this value for Max. So for example, here we can just change this one to true, and that is saved. And for Monica also, I can just specify the driver, for example, to be Max, and I can set the request accepted to be false. Allow the Max to only drive one person. So let's set the request accepted of John to be false, and Max only wants to give Jack a ride. And now it's time to let the passenger know that a driver has accepted the request, and we can let the passenger know that about the location of the driver that has accepted the request. And in this way, we can just connect the driver to the user that has sent this Uber request. So let's go back to Android Studio, and then let me just open the project navigator. Let's go and open the passenger activity. So now let's go ahead and create a new method in order to get the updates from the driver. So I'm gonna just paste this method here. So private void get driver updates, and then you just need to open and close this method by using these curly braces. So first we have a query from parse. So parse query, parse object, and the name is Uber request query, and we have the parse query that get query request car. So we want to get a query from this request car class. And here we have some conditions. First, we want to make sure that the request car objects that we get from this class, their username must be the same as the username of the current parse user. So this means that we want to get our own Uber request. Next, we want to make sure that a driver has actually accepted our request. So the request accepted is true. And we want to make sure that there is a driver for this request. So where exists driver of me. Now we are going to just call Uber request query that find in background, and then we have the find callback. This done method is going to be executed. So if the objects.size is greater than 0 and there is no error, then we are going to show a toast message to the user, and we are going to say, hooray, a driver wants to give you a ride. So here, let me tell you that we can also show the driver name here. Instead of saying a driver, we can say, for example, so let me just put the ending code here, and then let me delete this driver, a driver here. And then I can concatenate this value with the object that we get. So here, notice that we have this if statement. So we can just create a for loop here. So let me say for, and its type is going to be parse object, and object in the objects. So let's put this toast message inside the curly braces of this for loop, and then we can say object dot get. So notice that in the server, each request car object has a driver of me column. Okay, so here if I just go ahead and refresh this page, you can see that the username is Morteza, this request, the driver of me is Max. So I just need to go ahead and say get the value of the driver of me. Okay, now I just need to concatenate this value with the next string value. So hooray, this specific driver of me is going to or wants to give you a ride. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and we need to just call this method from somewhere. So let's go inside the onCreate method. For now, it is just the most simple solution. And here, after making sure that a request is sent to the server and this request is still alive and the Uber is not canceled, so we can just go ahead and call this get driver updates method. Now let's run our application. So first of all, let's go ahead and cancel our Uber request. I'm going to cancel it. Notice that I have logged in as a passenger. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a new Uber request. I'm going to log out from the app. Now I'm going to log in as a driver. 1, 2, 3. Let's change the state to log in and then click on log in. Now I'm going to click on this button. Here it is, the request from Morteza. So now I'm going to click on this item and then I want to give Morteza a ride. So now I can just click on back, log out. And if I log in as Morteza, then the onCreate method will be called, right? So this means it will show us a toast message that says, Hurai, Max wants to give you a ride. Now the passenger knows that Max wants to give this specific passenger a ride. So how we get the updates, how we just allow the user to get the updates. In this way, you can see that when the onCreate method is called, we get the updates. So let's go and let's add a button here. There are multiple solutions to this problem. For example, you can create a timer that is going to execute a bunch of codes each 10 seconds or every 10 seconds. And in every 10 seconds, you can go ahead and get the updates from the server and see whether a driver has decided to give the passenger a ride or not. So for now, let's go and open the activity passenger.xml file. Let me switch to the design tab. Let's add a new button here. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to change the place of this log out from app with this new button. So here it is, the button selected. Let's give it an ID. So I'm going to say btn beep beep. And let's set the text to be beep beep. Okay, let me also put an exclamation mark here. And then let's go inside the passenger activity class and let's declare our button here. So I'm going to say private button btn beep semicolon. Now let's go inside this onCreate method and initialize our button. So I'm going to say btn beep assignment operator find view by id r.id.btn beep beep semicolon. And then let's go ahead and set an onClick listener for this button. So I'm going to say btn beep .set onClick listener new view.onClick listener. And here we just need to call our method get driver updates. So now let's go ahead and run our application. So when the user taps on this button, we are going to get the driver updates. So now first, let's go ahead and cancel the Uber request. And then I am going to request a new car again here. So the request is sent, right? Let's go to the server. And here, let me just refresh this page so that we can see the new request that is created. And now you can see that the driver of me is undefined. So now I am going to specify the driver of me to be Max. And I am going to specify the request accepted to be true. So when I set that to true, you can see that it will, when I click on this beep beep, it will show the toast message to the user and says that Hurai, for example, Max wants to give you a ride. So here I need to, after setting this value to true, we need to just click on an empty area so that it is updated. And then we can click on beep beep. And now it says, Hurai, Max wants to give you a ride. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go back to Android Studio. So now we need to go ahead and calculate the distance between the passenger and the driver. Or in other words, we need to let the passenger know that how much distance the driver is away from the location of the passenger. So let's scroll down here And let's go inside the get driver updates method. And here you can see that we have this for loop. So inside this for loop here, we can access the objects that we get as parse object from the server. So the parse object is going to be the request car object. So inside this for loop, first of all, we are going to get the user or the driver that has accepted this request. So inside this for loop, I'm gonna first type in here parse user, and I'm gonna say the name is going to be driver assignment operator, and I'm gonna say parse user dot, and then just type in here get query semicolon. So here we can see that we have an error. So if I hover over this error area, it says that required parse user but found parse query. So in order to solve this problem, we need to name our variable as variable type should be parse query, and inside the angle brackets we can say parse user. Okay, so in this way we are getting a parse user query. So here let's name this variable as driver query, and then I can say driver query dot where equal to, so we want the username of this object. So let's change the name of this object to request object, and here we are simply saying driver query dot where the username is equal to the request object dot get. So notice that we have a method called get string. So give us the username or the name of the driver that has accepted this request. So the key is going to be driver of me. So you can see that each request object has a column named as driver of me. So we want to get this value, driver of me. And here we are simply saying that only give us the users or the user that its username is equal to the value of this driver of me, to this value that we specified in the server. So here, and this driver of me should be related to this request object because we are getting this driver of me from this request object that we get from the server. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, driver query dot find in background, and then it is going to be new find callback. So again, we need to check that there is no error and the object's dot size is greater than 0, and the error is equal to null. Then in that case, we can go ahead and create a for loop. So let's say for, and let's iterate over the objects that we get as a list. So parse object, and here notice that we are getting a parse user. So let me change it to parse user, and I can say driver of request, and then we are going to iterate over these objects. And inside this for loop, so here let me change the name of these objects to drivers, and let me change this name to drivers so it's more meaningful. Or you can just change it to, for example, user or users. Now that we have this driver of request, we need to access the location of this driver of request. So I'm gonna say parse geopoint, and I'm gonna say driver of request location assignment operator, and then I'm gonna refer to this driver of request dot get parse geopoint. Now we just need to pass the key or the name of the location or the column. So in the server, you can see that if you switch to the user class here, for the users that are driver, you can see that, for example, for this specific user Max, the location we saved here is this one. So we want to get this value location from this key, driver location. So I'm gonna go back to Android Studio and put two quotes, and I'm gonna just type in here driver location. That's it, semicolon. Now that we have this driver of request location, now we need to access the current location of passenger. So I'm gonna just type in here location, and let's name it as passenger location, assignment operator, and then here let's say that we have the location manager dot get last known location, and we just need to pass the provider, which is going to be location manager dot GPS provider, semicolon. So it seems that there is an error here. It says that the call requires permission which may be rejected by user. So here at this point of this application, the user should have already given us the permission, but in order to satisfy the compiler, I am going to create an if statement and say that context compat.check self permission. And first we need to pass the context, which is going to be the passenger activity.this, comma, and then we need to say manifest.permission dot, and then access find location is equal to the package manager.permission granted. So we need to make sure that we have already got the permission from the package manager. So I'm gonna just put this line of code inside the curly braces here. So now that we have this passenger location, it is of type location, but in order to convert this location with this driver of request location, we need to convert this passenger location to a parse geopoint location. So I'm gonna say parse geopoint, and then I am going to give it a name as, for example, P location as parse geopoint, so that it's more meaningful for you. Assignment operator, and then I am going to say new parse geopoint. So we just need to pass the latitude and the longitude that we get from this passenger location. So I'm going to say passenger location that get a latitude, comma, and the passenger location dot get longitude, semicolon. So now we have the passenger location as parse geopoint. Now let's see what we should do next. And now it's time to calculate the distance in miles to the passenger. So I'm gonna create a variable of type double, and the name of this variable is going to be miles distance assignment operator. And here we have this driver of request location. So I'm gonna refer to this variable, and I'm gonna say dot distance in miles to. So now we need to pass the target destination. So the target destination is going to be the passenger location. So I'm gonna say P location as parse geopoint, semicolon. Okay, now that we have this miles in distance, we need to round it to the nearest whole number. So you already know about the math operation. So I'm gonna type in here a float, and I'm gonna name it as rounded number, or let's say rounded distance, assignment operator, and I'm gonna refer to this math class dot round, and I'm gonna say miles distance, and here we need to just multiply this value by 10 divided by 10, semicolon. So this rounded distance is going to be the value that we want to show to the user. So now let's scroll down here. Let's just cut this toast message and let's paste it here after this float variable. So here, instead of saying, for example, Huray, this driver wants to give you a ride, let's say request object. So request object dot get string. So we want to get the username of this request object, or excuse me, the driver of me, and then we want to say that we want to concatenate this value with another string value. So we want to say this driver is space plus, so we have the rounded distance plus two quotes space miles away from you. Please wait. Please wait. So here it is, our toast message. So the length of this toast message is going to be length long and dot show. So now that we have this toast message, we can just go ahead and run our application. So let me run it. So first of all, let's go ahead, and here you can see that it says max is 0.0 miles away from you. So if I click on beep beep again, it will show you this message. Max is 0.0 miles away from you. Please wait. So let's go ahead and change the location of the driver. So I'm gonna go to the server, and here you can see the driver location. I am going to just double click on it and change this value to 40, and then submit this value. Make sure that it is updated. Let's go back to our emulator. Let's click on beep beep. Now it says max is 178 miles away from you. Please wait. So you can see that it is working fine without any problems. So now we need to go ahead and show the driver location here on this map. So let's go back to Android Studio, and let's go into our view locations map activity class, because in this activity we are going to show the locations of user and the passenger inside this onMap ready function. So these are the codes that we need to use. We need to have the driver location, the passenger location, and we are going to create this lat long bounds builder and the array list of markers. So these are the codes that we need to get. So let's just cut, or let's just copy these lines of code here. So you can see these codes that I have highlighted, just copy them, except this mmap Google Map here. All of these codes should be copied. Now let's go into this passenger activity class, and after showing this toast message before this ending curly brace of this if statement that you can see here, I'm gonna paste these codes. So let's see whether we have any errors or not. So first, let me just delete these commented codes here. Okay. Now here you can see that first we are going to have access to the driver location, but here we don't want to get the driver location from the intent. So we just want to here for this latitude, you can see I'm going to delete this value. So we get the latitude from the driver location. You can see that it is of type parse Jove point. So I'm going to say driver of request location dot get latitude. And for the longitude here, I'm just going to refer to the driver of request location dot get longitude. And also for this passenger location here, for the latitude, I'm gonna just pass the passenger location. Notice that here the passenger location, it is of type location. So I'm gonna just say get latitude, Or if you want to refer to the parse geopoint value here, its name is pLocation as parse geopoint dot get latitude. So there is no difference between this parse geopoint or that location. It's just, we just want to get the value of the latitude. And here, we don't want to specify the default value here. So I'm just gonna pass the pLocation dot get longitude. So hopefully that makes sense. Now that we have these values here set as the driver location and the pLocation, these are the codes that are going to show us both of these locations on the map, the marker, the for loop, and this lat long bounds. And finally, we have the camera update, as you can see here, and the camera update here. It is going to be animated. But take a look at this one. It is the offset value that is going to specify the marker according to the edges of the map. So I'm gonna change the offset to 10. So now let's go ahead and run our application and let's see what happens. So you can see that it says there are 178 miles away from you. And you can see that both of these locations are on the map. Let me change the offset to, for example, 80. And let me run the app again. Now you can see these locations on the map. And if I click on beep beep, you should see the distance here. So everything is working fine, but let's go ahead and change the location of the driver to, for example, let me change it to 37, the latitude. It is much more nearer to the location of the passenger. So let me click on beep beep. Now the driver is nearer to the location of the passenger. So you can see that there is still a problem here. And the problem is related to the updating the passenger location. And you can see that the camera is on the passenger location. So if I click on the beep beep here, first it's gonna go ahead and give us the location of the passenger and the driver. And then it's gonna go back to the location of the passenger or the current user. So in order to solve this problem, let's go ahead and let's go inside this passenger activity class. And I'm gonna go ahead and create a new variable here. So notice that here I am using the Android Studio 3.2, and here you can see that we have the R error. So when I use this version of Android Studio, I sometimes get this error. So in order to solve this problem, I need to go ahead and I need to just open the Android Studio version of 3.3. So in this version, you can see that the R error does not exist. So maybe this is a problem with the Android Studio 3.2, which is currently an official version of Android Studio. So I'm gonna close this version here together. So for example, you can have a beta version and an official version. So whenever you encounter a problem in the official version, you can simply switch to the beta version that might be less buggy. So first, let's go ahead and create a variable inside our class because we don't want the camera to be updated on the current location of passenger if a car is ready, if a driver has accepted the request. So I'm gonna create a private variable and I'm gonna just specify the data type to be Boolean. The name is going to be is car ready. And initially I'm gonna assign the value false to this variable, semicolon. So now I'm gonna go inside the method that is going to update the camera based on the current location of the passenger. This one, update camera passenger location. And I'm gonna create an if statement and say that if the car is ready is equal to false. So this means that there is no car ready here. Then we can go ahead and just show the current location of passenger. But if that is not the case and the car is actually ready and it is true, then we are going to go ahead and update the camera based on the location of the passenger and the driver. So let's go ahead and find the get driver updates. And here you can see these are the codes that we should write in order to update the location of the passenger and the driver. So here the best place to set the value of this is car ready to true is inside this get driver updates method and inside this done method. Then here we are checking that if the objects.size is greater than 0, so this means that there is a request that is actually accepted and there is a value for the driver of me. So inside this if statement here, simply before this for loop, I just need to refer to this variable is car ready, and then I'm going to assign the value true to this variable. Okay. So now if I go ahead and run the application, now the camera should only be updated based on the location of the passenger and driver. So let's go ahead and click on this ellipsis button that you can see just beside this emulator. And then you can see the longitude and the latitude value. So here it is the latitude. I'm going to just copy this value and notice that this value is related to the location of the passenger. And I'm going to go to the server. Let's go to the user class here. So here we have the drivers and passengers. For the driver, we have a location for the max. So notice the latitude of the location of max. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to just paste the value, this latitude that I copied from the latitude of the current location of passengers, this value. And then I'm just going to update this value. So now if I go to the emulator and click on this beep beep, now the location of the passenger and the location of the driver should be updated. And you can see that these two locations are near each other. So I'm just going to change this value a little bit. I'm going to say, for example, 37.00. And then I'm going to update this value. Let's go back to emulator and click on beep beep. Now you can see that the location is updated and it says max is 29 miles away from you. Please wait. So hopefully that makes sense. And now that this problem is solved, let's go to Android Studio. So here we set the value of this is car ready variable to true, right? So we should also set the value of this variable to false when the objects.size is not greater than 0 or there is an error here according to this query, to this Uber request query. So I'm going to go ahead and find the ending curly brace of this if statement here. So here it is, the if statement, the ending curly brace. And then I'm going to create an else statement here. And I'm going to say is car ready false. So when this line of code is executed, then it's going to go ahead and only show the camera on the location of the passenger instead, because we have an if statement here. So let me show you the method that says that if the value of this is car ready is false, then go ahead and update the camera based on the location of the passenger or the current location. So for example, if I now go ahead and run the application, and now you can see that it's gonna just update the camera based on the location of the passenger and the driver because there is a request. So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel the Uber request here. Now that the Uber request is canceled, if I click on beep beep, let's see what happens. So here you can see that now the camera is updated and it is on the location of the passenger. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go back to Android Studio because there are some other problems that we should solve. So first of all, I don't want the user to click on this button beep beep and then we update the map. That's not a good user experience. We can go ahead and execute this get driver updates method each 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, this method will be executed. And now let's go ahead and open our web browser. And here I searched for how to execute a code multiple times Android Java. So here you can see that we have a link on Stack Overflow. And here we have a link, and you can see that this link, this post is related to May 24, 2017. So I think it's a good option. Let's click on it. And let me scroll down here. So here you can see that there are some answers, but the one that I'm looking for is the timer. So it says create a variable of type timer and then schedule this timer at fixed rate. So we have already covered this topic. So I'm just gonna use it here. I'm just gonna copy these codes and I'm gonna go back to my Android Studio, the Uber clone. So here inside the get driver updates, I'm gonna paste these codes. And here we have this variable timer. So it's gonna schedule this timer at fixed rate. But let's specify this timer variable as an instance variable so that it will be alive throughout the lifetime of our application. Because when we create this variable inside this method, its lifetime starts here and then it will end at the ending curly brace of this method. So that is not a good solution to this problem, because we want this timer to be executed at fixed rate every, for example, 5 seconds. So we need this variable to be alive throughout our application. We don't want to just end this timer when the flow of the program reaches to the ending curly brace of our method. So I'm just gonna copy this piece of code, and then I'm gonna delete this timer here. I'm gonna scroll to the top, and I'm just gonna say private, and I'm gonna paste this here. So inside our get driver updates method, here we are initializing this timer, and then we are scheduling at fixed rate. So the delay is going to be 0. We want to execute this code now without any delay. And every, for example, 3 seconds, I want the code inside of this run method to be executed. So I'm going to delete these codes, and I'm just going to copy all of these Uber request query here. So make sure that you do not copy the ending curly brace of this method or the ending curly brace of this class. So make sure that you only copy the codes that are related to this query, or just cut it here and then go inside the run method and paste it. Now you can see that the codes inside this run method will be executed every 3 seconds. So we specified the value of the delay and period here. And let's go ahead and request a car. So our request is sent to the server. Let's go to our server. Let me refresh this request car class. And then we need to specify a value for the driver of me. So I'm going to say driver of me is going to be Max. And the request accepted is going to be true. So make sure that you update these values here. And it says updated. Let's go back to our emulator. And I'm going to click on beep beep. So now you can see that it is updated based on the location of the passenger and the driver. So now I'm going to click on cancel the Uber order, and now it should just go ahead and update the location or the camera based on the location of the passenger without requiring me to click on this beep beep button. So you can see that the code here we put inside our run method is executed every 3 seconds. So hopefully that makes sense. So now hopefully you get an idea that what you can do here in order to just modify this application and make it better and better. And here I'm just teaching you these concepts to just allow you and giving you tools to just create an application that is helpful and solves a problem. So now that this problem is solved, we are ready to do something else. So how about changing the color of the marker that we have on the map? So let's go back to our web browser, and here I'm just gonna search for another thing. I'm gonna search for how to change the color of marker in Google Maps Android Java. Android Java. So let's see what we have here. It says changing color of markers. So let's click on this link, and now we have an answer. So it says Google Map.add marker. So here we have the new marker options with the position and the title and the snippet. And here you can see that we have something called icon. And here we have bitmap descriptor factory default marker, bitmap descriptor factory hue orange. So let's just copy this piece of code here, this icon, and let's go back to Android Studio. And here I'm just gonna change the color of the marker when the camera is updated on the location of the passenger. So I'm just gonna find this method here, update camera passenger location. So here we are calling map.add marker, and here we are specifying the title. So after this title, I'm gonna say dot icon, and I'm gonna paste this specific code here. So I'm just gonna delete this dot icon here again. I don't need it. And then we have this one, bitmap descriptor factory default marker, bitmap descriptor factory hue orange. So let me click or delete this ending curly brace. So it seems that it needs an ending curly brace here. So I'm just gonna put it here, and I'm gonna put another ending curly brace here. So hopefully it should now solve the problem. So let's hover over this error area. It says another ending curly brace is expected. So let me delete this starting curly brace here of this icon, and I'm gonna, so you can see that here we needed 3 ending curly braces or parentheses, excuse me. And now let's go ahead and run our application and see whether we have a different color for our marker or not. So you can see that it is working. Let's see whether we can choose another color. So I'm gonna delete this one, and I'm gonna hold the control and then press on the space key on my keyboard. So you can see all of these colors. So for example, I can choose a blue one or a violet or a yellow one. Let's choose this one, hue rose. Let's run our app, and here you can see the color of the marker is changed. So hopefully this makes sense. So as the final feature to this application, we need to do something when the driver comes near to the location of the passenger. So this means that the driver is reached to the destination, that is going to be the location of the passenger, and now the driver can give this passenger a ride. So in order to solve this problem, we need to go inside our get driver updates method here. And then here you can see that we have these codes. First, we have the query that we get from the request car class based on these conditions that we put here. And then here you can see that we are getting the location of the passenger and the location of the driver as a parse geopoint object. And then here we are calculating the distance between the location of the driver and the location of the passenger. So here we can do something here. We can say, for example, let's just after this line of code that calculates the miles distance here between the location of the passenger and the driver, let's create an if statement. So let's say that if the miles distance, so it is of type double, right, is less than 0.3, then here we can just consider that the driver is now ready to give this passenger a ride. The driver is reached to the destination. Now I can just say that, for example, let's just show a toast message, toast.make text. Let's pass the context, which is going to be the passenger activity.des, comma, and then the message is going to be your Uber is ready. And then I can say hooray. Next, I'm gonna specify the duration of this message, .show. And here we need to also set the value of the is car ready to false, because here we don't need to have the car ready to be true because the car is reached to the location of the passenger, and now we can set this value to false. And then here we have another variable that is going to check for whether we have our request ready inside our activity or not. So here we have is Uber cancelled. So we can go ahead and set this variable to true and say that yes, the Uber is now cancelled. So I'm gonna just scroll down here inside our driver or get driver updates method. After setting the value of this variable is car ready to false, I'm gonna say is Uber cancelled to true. So this means that now the user can go ahead and just call another Uber. And I am going to set the text of this btn request car to be you can call or you can order a new order. You can order a new order now. And also we are going to delete the request objects that we get from the server. So notice that the request objects that are created by this username should now be deleted so that the user can create a new request car. And here notice that we have already created a query for the request objects that we want to get from the server. So here you can see that we have created this query and the name is user request query, and we have already put these codes here in order to loop through the objects or the request objects that we get from the server. So now I can just simply refer to that request object here inside the if statement or the curly braces of this if statement. I'm gonna just say request object dot delete in background with a new delete callback. So when this object is deleted, let's go ahead and let's say that if there is no error, so if error is equal to null, then let's just put these codes, for example, this toast message and all of these variable setting here, just cut them and put inside this if statement. And so here in this way, after making sure that this request car object is deleted, we can go ahead and set these values here. We can show this toast message. We can set the value false to our is car ready variable. We can set the value true to this is Uber cancelled. And then we can set the text of this button to be you can order a new Uber now. So excuse me, I had a typo, Uber. You can order a new Uber now. So if this if statement is true, then it's gonna execute these codes here. But if this if statement is not true, so we have an else statement, so in that case, we are going to just put or execute these other codes. We are going to show the location of the passenger and the driver here on the map. So now you just need to put the ending curly brace of this else statement here after this mmap.animate camera. So I'm just going to put it here. And now let's go ahead and run our application. So hopefully now it works fine without any problems. First, let's go ahead and create our request a car. So a car request is sent. Now let's go to the server. Let me refresh this page. And then we need to specify the driver of me. So I'm gonna set this value to be max and the request accepted to be true. Make sure to update these values. Let's open our emulator and now let's click on beep beep. Let's see what happens. So now the map is updated. Let's take a look at the location of the passenger. So the longitude is this value and the latitude is this value. I'm just gonna copy the value of this latitude and I'm gonna go to the user class. So here we should have the driver max and the location of the driver. So I'm just gonna paste the value of the latitude here, and I'm gonna just submit this value and update it. Let's go back to our emulator. So you can see that it showed us the toast message that said your car is ready. Now it says you can order a new Uber now. So we can just go ahead and create a new Uber. And if I go ahead and click on this request car class, you can see that it says no data to display. So the object is deleted here. So hopefully that makes sense. And now let's go ahead and run our application again and make sure that everything is working fine without any problems. First, I'm gonna go ahead and request a car. So our request car is sent. Okay, now we can go to the server and we can click on this request car, and you should see a new object here. Now let's go to the user class, and here we have the driver Max. So here it is, the location of Max 37.4. So that's okay. Let's go to the request car class. I'm gonna change the driver of me to be Max and the request accepted to be true. I'm gonna update these values, make sure that here it says this request car object is updated. Now I'm gonna go ahead and go open my emulator, and I'm gonna click on this beep beep. Let's see what happens. So now it says Max is 1 mile away from you. Please wait. Now let's go ahead and update the location of Max. Let's click on the user class, and then let's say that the driver location latitude is now, for example, 37.4 or 0.42, and then update this value. Now it should update the map based on the value that we put here for the location of the driver. So it says that, hooray, your Uber is ready. You can order a new Uber now. So everything is working fine without any problems. This is what we expected our application to behave. And this is the end. Congratulations. You've made it to the end of this section. This was a very large application, and by just building this application, you should now be able to create any server-based applications. So thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.